Did you get a package, Sean?
How you doing? I've been all right. I was sick and it's crazy. If it's not one thing, it's another. I hate getting old.
I was just me and Dan, 2 minutes to 9. Oh, good. We can go home. And Steve shows up. Free. I said, oh, so you guys all show up. I gotta mow my lawn before it gets,
Yeah.
before it gets more too windy. So,
It's supposed to get windy in the afternoon.
yeah, they were all the afternoons. So,
Janine, are you ready? Good morning. Welcome to the meeting of March 23rd, 2023. Roll call of officers, please.
Commissioner Zargis,
here,
Commissioner Herrera, Commissioner Montañez,
Present.
Commissioner Lear,
Here.
Commissioner Castañeda,
Here.
Vice Chair Zerniak, Chair Acosta.
Present. Okay, item number 2, approval or changes to the agenda, Commissioners?
Move the agenda as presented.
We have a motion on the floor, second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor, please state by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Number 3, number 3, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 9, 2023.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Number 4, old business.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a quick reminder, if you want to remind the audience, if they want to sign up to speak, they're more than welcome to.
Thank you very much. I hope you saw somebody in the gallery. Maybe,
I just didn't want to leave that out, sir.
maybe you're seeing something we don't. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
One of those meetings.
Well, this is the first time we had, nobody in the gallery. Amazing. Welcome to the meeting, Albert. Item number 5, new business. Proposed amendment number 4 to Unified Development Code decision criteria for SUPs, cannabis establishment, and community solar facilities. I'm sure there's going to be discussion, and I'd like for the commissioners to please state your opinion regarding the amendment for criteria for SUPs regarding the cannabis establishments. And you're free to jump in. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Yes, this is a public hearing regarding amendment number 4 to the UDC. I'm not sure what level of detail you'd like me to go into. Since we've discussed the amendments numerous times, we held a couple of work sessions. We also presented it to the DRC. The DRC did make a positive recommendation for adoption. However, they did have one additional amendment, and that was related to the community solar facilities. And we'll discuss that later. So regarding the special use permits, we just went ahead and clarified and updated various sections, specifically regarding the decisional criteria. The font that's identified in red on the presentation is the new language, and nothing has changed since our last meeting. So would you like me to go in to read it, or just scroll through and discuss what the commission feels is necessary to discuss?
Yeah, I think it'd be quicker if you respond to questions.
Yeah. Okay, so the special use permit for the decisional criteria is section 204A. We're just clarifying that any code violations that cannot be remedied by an SUP shall be corrected before it goes to a public hearing if possible.
Wait, I've got a question about that.
Okay? You did the last time, so we added additional language.
Well, my question about that is this. Why do we even allow somebody to come before us if they have a code violation? Why don't we say that the property should be clear of all code violations before it comes to a public hearing?
Well, sometimes the remedy is the special use permit to correct that code violation. But if there's trash accumulation of solid waste or something that's not affected by a public hearing, then we ask them to have that corrected before they do come before.
So what's an example of a code violation that's correct?
Someone's operating a business out of their home, they don't have the proper zoning, or they need a special use permit to operate that business.
So, Mr. Chair.
Did we have any examples?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, one
Yeah, go ahead.
example that I'd like to give, if you know, we did have one case where business was operating and we were told by the applicant that the ruling on their violation could not be determined until we had made ours, till we had made our ruling on the application. I don't, it's, in some cases, it's a little difficult for me to believe that a judge would tell, you know, an applicant, well, go to planning and zoning and get, you know, get zoning taken care of before, you know, before you come, I mean, it could be just a claim that the applicant's making. In that case, there were attorneys involved. But we have, I mean, this has been a concern of mine for quite some time, that we start getting these applications simply because somebody got caught, and they're trying to now either acquire an SUP or, you know, or a zoning change to remedy that. So until there's some kind of clarity, especially if it's coming from the courts, or maybe some written documentation from the courts that says, we're not going to rule until, you know, until this case has been heard. But I personally, you did say state your opinion. I, you know, personally believe that this is, you know, this is something that we can do to remedy those situations. Thank you.
Chair, the other example that I can think of that they don't really come to this board because they're administratively approved are second homes on a property. You know, the home might already be there, and in order to correct that violation, they need to come back into us and submit for an administrative SUP. And they only come before you unless if there's like neighborhood opposition or something like that. But that would be another example of the violation already being on the property, and the only remedy would be the approval of an SUP or going through the SUP process. I think that the intent of this section right here might be for other violations, and the one that comes to mind real quick, it's grading. You know, somebody goes out there and grades, a 10-acre lot, and you know, now they come back in here because they want to, you know, do a mobile home park or do a subdivision or whatever, and we need that fixed before they can submit either a zone change or an SUP application. But those are the examples that come to mind.
Yes, thank you, Albert. That's the perfect example. The grading and drainage, they need to remedy that before they come in for the special use permit.
And then we fine them for that?
A triple fee.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just another mechanism that we can apply to try to get compliance before we bring it to you if it has to go to a public hearing.
Just this is a personal thing. It biases me when I hear that they have a code violation.
Yeah.
It automatically puts them on that other side of the line, right? And it makes it tough to believe them. Or makes it harder to believe them, what they say.
I know.
Yeah, I'll follow the rules.
If you,
Mr. Chair,
if you recall that case we had last week, that last meeting when we all voted down with the multiple violations. And
Yeah.
before that, we had the other one with the triple fine. I remember that a couple of meetings ago. So just tie into this.
yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, those are great examples, and we can all agree here, how many applications and how many presentations have we seen where they may not have received a violation, but we've clearly seen, we've clearly seen grading and grubbing. We've clearly seen, we've seen wrought iron sticking out of the ground. We've seen quite a few. They've kind of moved ahead without, without the approval, and then here we are, here we are ruling on a case they've already started on. I do personally believe that there, some kind of awareness, because this is happening a lot more often than a lot of us are comfortable with, but certain kind of awareness that kind of work really should not begin, until they've received the necessary special use permit, approval or zone change or whatever's necessary to get started at this point. So I do believe this would, I do hope that this would clear up some of those issues that we've been having, because I mean, we've seen it and we've addressed it before. And we just want to make sure that make sure that does not, we don't continue to see that, especially in presentations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on. So regarding special use permits, we're asking that in the narrative, They include how they're going to address their best management practices. This is something that we really haven't been applying in the SUP applications. And Dr. Zerniak, you brought it up in the first work session, that we should include it throughout the special use permit. So this is one of the sections where we're asking the applicant to address the best management practices, to show how they're going to optimize their resources.
Janine, is that defined somewhere?
It is, and I actually have it on the screen here, the best management practices, and that's defined in the glossary.
Okay, okay.
Okay. It's really related to discharge of pollutants and EPA requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the signs for this special use permits, we're asking that they be posted on or near the property lines and be maintained by the applicant for a minimum of 21 days. When we first addressed it, we just said posted on the property line, and then we had further discussion that sometimes you can't go on the property line, so we said on or near the property line, and then we've also included that the applicant maintain the signs for the 21 days. So that'll be for administrative and public hearing special use permits.
Excuse me. So what happens if they do not maintain the sign and it rains and whatever happens to it?
Well, we ask that they repost it as soon as possible the next day, but if it goes on too long, sometimes we do have to postpone the public hearing.
Is that the postponement, is that on the language here?
It is not, no. But that's why we're specifically specifying that they need to maintain it for 21 days.
Or maybe you want to add something that says that if it's not maintained or falls or is removed, then it might be postponed.
I think we actually tell the applicant that when they come in to pick up the signs. But if you feel that it should be added, we certainly can.
Janine, would that be in writing in some kind of something that can be given to them when they leave, or just knowing that it's in writing? I mean, we appreciate that you tell them, but I can hear an applicant saying that they were just never told that.
Right. Mhm. Yes, and in the past, we used to have a form that they signed acknowledging that, so we can certainly establish that process and procedure.
So should it say that, shall be posted on the property maintained by the applicant, shall be posted as directed by county staff? In other words, they don't know what, I mean, a conspicuous place to me might not be the same thing to Mel. If I was Mel, I'd be posting it like 30 feet back from the property line behind a bush. I mean, right? So should the county staff have some authority to say where that sign is posted? I mean, conspicuous seems it's too vague.
Conspicuous locations in a manner that is reasonably calculated to notify adjacent property owners and passers-by. I don't think we've really had any issues, have we, Albert? Sometimes the applicants do ask and.
I mean, I've heard people come in and say, I never saw the sign. Now, maybe they weren't looking, right?
I think there's been instances where, especially like in controversial cases, I can think like the one we had in Chaparral for Mr. Manny Cervantes, you know, the guy who was suing the cannabis facility there. You know, a lot of the complaints were that, well, he didn't meet that requirement. He didn't put the signs up for 21 days. And Manny was, no, I did. So I'm not too sure how I feel about this one. I mean, the more language we add to it, I think the more it can be used for either in favor or against a case.
Well, I guess when you go out and take pictures, that's when you find out whether they posted the sign and whether it's in an appropriate
Right now,
place.
we do notify applicants to send us an email or, you know, a picture of when they posted the sign.
Okay.
That way, at least we have something on file, you know, with the date stamp on there, stating that, you know, that the sign was posted. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that it's not just the signs that have to meet the 21-day criteria, it's the legal ad as well and the letters. So there's 3 items that they have to meet, you know, that they have to meet for the 21 days. The ad that goes out, the signs that have to be posted, and the letters themselves.
Okay.
Do you think we need a clause in there that says failure to do so may result in the postponement of your public hearing?
Absolutely.
I believe so.
I do, yeah. I think that's right.
This ultimately, this is also even at the protection of the applicant, because, I mean, you do hear, I mean, it could be where exactly the sign was posted on their lot. Is it at the, you know, does it offer the highest visibility? You know, depending on the cross street, depending on where they could see it, whether or not it's behind Commissioner Acosta's front bush. But I've even heard, and I do understand there, I mean, if there's somebody in opposition that, I mean, and we've heard it before, I mean, I've heard people in opposition because they could not read the size of the font they wanted.
Yeah.
You know, but if the sign is there where, you know, in a place where they do know that there's a sign and they can, you know, pull up, even if they have to get out of their vehicle to read it, but at least the applicant is, you know, has really made every effort, you know, that they can to really, they want to inform everybody just as much as we want them to as well. So I do believe that this would really be for even the protection of the applicant as well.
And our signs are fluorescent orange or fluorescent green, so they do stand out. So is your recommendation to add a statement after the first sentence in paragraph A, that failure to do so may result in a postponement of your case? And then the other one in the postponement of the public hearing under 2A for the public hearing? Okay, all right, we'll definitely include that. Thank you. Okay, so regarding decisional criteria, we're asking that that the applicant provide additional information if it's requested from the zoning administrator, P&Z, or the BOCC, and that the burden of proof shall rest solely on the applicant regarding the SUP, and then it shall meet the following decisional criteria. And then under 1A, we're expanding on the traffic flows and impact and asking them to address measures to accommodate their ingress and egress to avoid congestion and impede traffic flows. And then we're also asking them to show that they have sufficient off-street parking and loading facilities. Okay, and I think that was at the request of Dr. Zerniak. And then under 2, we're asking them to address how their SUP will comply with the comp plan. And then in 3, expand on the potential water and sewer needs, that they need to show documentation that infrastructure is available. So in this particular case, we would ask them to submit a ready, willing, and able letter from the provider, water and sewer. Any questions? Okay. Okay, moving on to the decisional criteria regarding the infrastructure. We're asking the applicant to address exactly what the public facilities and services are available and how they will meet the demand that will be generated by the proposed use and how it can accommodate the development. And then under 5, if there are some environmentally sensitive areas, how they will mitigate that through the SUP. Okay, then in 6, we're asking them to address how the SUP will provide a positive impact on adjacent properties, and they need to show that it's not detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the neighboring residents. And then in 7, regarding the best management practices, again, we're asking them to demonstrate and to submit a schedule of activities, some maintenance procedures or other practices to show how the site development work will optimize the MS4 standards and whatnot for the best management practices. Any questions on the decisional criteria? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then under the approval process and conditions for the SUP, we're just adding a statement that the SUP shall not be considered as establishing a binding precedence for other SUPs. And then under G, recording of the SUP, we're just adding conditions that we need to put what the conditions of the SUP is in the order that is recorded with the clerk's office. Okay. Okay, then for the land use matrix, I'm going to turn the cannabis over to Albert to discuss with you what the amendments are. Thank you.
Before you begin, Albert, there's going to be quite a bit of discussion regarding this next topic. And when we had the sheriff last year, within the last 18 months, she stated that our legislators put all this forth and there was no contingency plans for enforcement. She said the law was left out of it. So basing it on that, there's going to be a lot of discussion with us commissioners, okay? So it's going to be, like I said before, just jump in. Just it's a free flow discussion. We need to discuss it at length. And so go ahead, proceed.
Sure. For me? Oh, not just, okay. Good morning, commissioners. So under the land use matrix, under the introduction, when it comes to the matrix, you know, we have permitted uses, conditional uses. The A stands for those properties that are assessed as ag, and the S, of course, it's a special use permit. And then we have the asterisk for retail uses not elsewhere classified, or, you know, they have like some size limitation for the square footage of that building. When it comes to properties that are assessed as ag, we're basically adding the item that's highlighted in yellow right there. We're stating that for cannabis microbusiness producer, and cannabis producer, a public hearing and SUP shall be required if the property is located within a recorded subdivision with lot sizes that are 1 acre or less. That's the item that we're adding under those properties that are assessed as ag. Basically, when the code was adopted, I mean, the intent was basically to allow those properties that were already assessed as ag to be able to, you know, grow cannabis, whether it was indoor or outdoor, you know. But, you know, throughout the, you know, since it was adopted, you know, we've seen that people have gotten, you know, a little bit creative, I guess, when it comes to kind of like going around those rules. But the intent of this is, you know, not to have a facility in the middle of a residential neighborhood. You know, that's basically what the intent is. So we've added that item on there. On the land use matrix itself, we did have an error for where a cannabis micro business producer and a cannabis producer was allowed. And just to clarify, a micro business producer is somebody that can only grow up to 200 plants. The producer, it's 200 plants or more, up to whatever, you know, the state of New Mexico allows them. But basically, this should have been allowed under C1 and C2. That is something that was approved, but it was just not carried over onto the matrix.
So Albert, does the assessors database talk to the zoning database? Are they integrated so that one, you can look at them simultaneously?
They're not integrated. I mean, we can't click on the zoning layer and see how the property's being assessed, but we can go into their system, you know, through a parcel number or a map code and look at the property itself and see how it's being taxed.
So my question is this, on T3, T4, T5, are there actually properties with those zoning designations that are assessed as agriculture?
They're, T3, there's more likely probably on T3, because they're, you know, they're typically a little bit bigger, they're less than 2 acres, and you need at least a minimum of an acre to be assessed as ag. T4s and T5s, because they're like in the town centers, you know, they might be a little bit smaller. It's highly unlikely that we're gonna find any of those assessed as ag.
So then what about high-density residential, D3? There's actually properties that are high-density residential zoning and assessed as ag? Yes? Oh,
They may, Mr. Chair, they may not be now assessed as ag, but I want to go back to what Albert's saying. Anybody wanting to grow there can very easily now go to the assessor's office and get a reassessment as agriculture.
Get reassessed?
Yes, or yes,
Well,
this is. they're-
Chair, I mean, that's something that people were doing before. It's not something that the assessor's office is entertaining anymore. They kind of put a halt to that practice.
That's what's gotten us into the situation. we're in.
So what I'm wondering is, would it be a worthwhile exercise to find out, if we could do that kind of intersection, look at T3, 4, 5, D3, DM, and MU, and see how many parcels are assessed as ag under that zoning. If the number is minimal, I don't know why we would allow anybody to grow cannabis in those zones. It just seems they're too dense, and the potential for them to be developed. Why should we even consider a special use permit for those parcels?
If I recall, we did a similar exercise, but we didn't look at the assessment of the property. We just looked at acreage, because we figured, you know, as long as it's more than 1 acre, potentially they can get that ag assessment on there. So we did something similar, and we came up with some maps, but for sure, we can talk to the assessors and see if we can get that info. Probably like on an Excel sheet, and then just transfer that over into a shapefile and see how we can cross-reference that.
Because my preference would be to not allow it, if we could do it.
I mean, that could be a recommendation too. Let me go down the list of presentations. Let me get into the wording. And then I think we can probably find an area where we can probably include a statement or come up with a statement that might go along the lines of, for, you know, cannabis microbusiness producer or cannabis producer, if you are not currently assessed as ag, you are not allowed to request an ag assessment in order to operate without the approval of a special use permit. Or basically, you have to get an SUP if you're not assessed as ag. You can't just walk across the hall and request that ag assessment if it's just a vacant piece of property.
Is that at the discretion of the county assessor?
Yes.
I can't speak for their office, but it might be. But from what I understand, is that they're not entertaining that anymore.
It might be a worthwhile exercise.
And just, Commissioners, let me remind you, once we open up this, okay, it's going to be very difficult to close. So at this point in time, state your opinion and how you feel. And the reason being is that when you have residential, you'll have the gallery full. Parents, schools close by, on and on and on. Children being dropped off. So bear that in mind when you think about this situation. It's a serious situation. We need to make sure that we, slow it down somewhat. Consider that. Thank you. And just jump in.
Mr. Chair,
State your opinion.
Albert, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our original recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners was to acquire a special use permit, even if the property was assessed as agriculture. And that was amended by the Board of Commissioners, at that time. So this is,
If I recall, it wasn't based on the ag assessment, it was based on the zoning.
okay.
And it was, staff was recommending, and I think, the P and Z as well was recommending that any property zoned at D1 and D1L had to
Had to have a special use permit.
Had to have a special use permit, whether or not they were assessed as ag. That was one of our original
And
recommendations.
that was, however, that was, the Board of Commissioners did make that adjustment. I know there were a couple of adjustments made that we, that we did not recommend so this really, we all knew that there would, everybody, there's always going to be an unintended consequence. And that's why we're here, really to, to address that. But the Board of Commissioners has also been, in some cases, inundated with concerned residents. I've seen videos streaming where this room was, pretty full. Some of them have received quite a few phone calls and emails. I have as well. So that's, again, that's where we are. But I just wanted to, on record, I just wanted to, just to inquire about that this was an original recommendation by this commission. Thank you.
And just to add a little bit more, we've been directed by Christina not to, recommend people to just walk across the hall if they're not assessed as ag. Right now, if somebody comes in, if they don't have that ag assessment, we just send out the SUP application. So we're kind of putting a stop to that practice. This one's,
Albert, Mr. Chair, couple things. One is Chairman Acosta basically said, once we open that door, it's going to be hard to close it. But I would, maybe I'm taking too hard of a line on this, but it seems to me that D2, D2L, D3, DM, and MU, I can't picture the situation where we would allow a cannabis growing or retail in any of those. The low density ones, I can see that where they might be more apt to be zoned ag and bigger acreage and everything, but all the Ds at MU, to me, it's just, I think it would be a good idea for us to say no to that now with the idea that maybe it could be amended in the future. But once we say yes to it right now, it's going to be really tough to back out of that later.
That's right.
I think there is an A on those, D2s and D2Ls, on those zoning designations. I think most of our cases have just been for D1 and D1L, just because of that acreage that's there. I'm trying to think if there might be some farms out there that do have that D2 designation for whatever reason, just because of their old ETZ designation, but those have been really, really minimal.
So, Dan, Mr. Chair, Albert, so under the definition of A, it says permitted if assessed as agriculture. We say permitted if assessed as agriculture as of January 1st, 2023. So that they, after that, too bad. Can we put a timestamp on that?
I think it'd be too restrictive.
I think,
Well, in other words, if they have it, right now, if somebody has an agricultural assessment, they can do this. And we have no control over that.
Right.
But what we can say explicitly, after this date, you can't go across the hall and get the change. So that's not too restrictive. We haven't affected anybody that has it. We're just saying you
Right.
can't go get it.
Right. That's what I was saying. If they have it,
Yeah, but you can't change that.
I think there might be some, I'm trying to think of the possible scenarios, right off the bat. But, after 2023, there might be a legitimate case, I guess, where somebody does have 10 acres and, maybe, 5 years ago, they started planting pecans and now they're barely coming in. So technically it is an ag property. On the flip side, there might be somebody out there who was assessed as ag at the beginning of the year, and we're trying to limit their growth. And by putting in that language in there, they might be grandfathered in, and not even grandfathered, and they might be able to just to keep on adding more structures because technically they were ag.
Well, they can keep doing whatever ag allows them to do.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, that might be a suggestion too. But I'm just trying to think a little bit ahead to see what some of the consequences might be on that one.
Well, it says permitted if assessed. So what, you can see that as saying if currently assessed, right? So that's the same thing as if, they had it prior to a certain date. I'm just saying that we should either prohibit them from being able to change that, and take it off the hands of the assessor,
Okay.
right? I mean, maybe the assessor would object to that, I don't know. And maybe the commissioners will object, but I think it's worth putting it, at least trying it.
Okay.
Because as Dan said, all those categories from T3 to T5 and from D2 to MU on the chart, there's no reason people should be commercially growing plants in those. I don't know if we would allow them to grow corn or alfalfa on those properties if they're not assessed as ag.
Technically, you don't need an ag assessment to start growing corn on
Okay.
your property. So,
Commercially?
you might. You need one for a greenhouse, for a commercial greenhouse. But if it's a farmer with the D2, it's the zoning allows ag by right. So you don't need that ag assessment.
What?
They can grow 12 plants individually for their own personal
Well, that,
use.
and that's state law. We can't do anything about that. But it seems to me that, why would you say to somebody, look, if you're in a mobile home park,
Right.
I mean, that's what this says. If you're in a mobile home park and you go get an ag assessment, you could commercially grow marijuana in that mobile home park, on that little lot next to you. I mean, that makes no sense at all.
Well, let's go back a little bit, Albert. And I think that we should mentally look at the county per se. You have townships, you have mobile home parks, you have Placitas up in Hatch, Garfield Array, Hatch. Then you go south, Chamberino, La Mesa, Mesquite, Alto de las Flores, all of them through there, right? Then you go to the Chaparral, right? Sunland Park, Meadow Vista. Okay, when you mentally look at all of this, there's one in specific is Pueblo Trail, right? Westmoreland Pueblo Trail. When you go there, and I'm glad that the fire marshal is here. We may ask him some questions here in a minute. On commercial, we have to identify commercial as to mentally figure out what is and what isn't, what can you do and what you can't do. So the question I have is, it poses, I think, a big impediment for law enforcement and fire, and of course residential people that live there. It's a concern to them. And I will almost assure you that if we let this wide open, I believe that we're going to have the gallery here on any case that comes here. And it's going to be a very contentious situation. So I would rather restricted
So what, so,
to conditions, right?
Chair, so for the language, maybe on this section, we can start off on this section and then maybe include it on further sections. Would you entertain an amendment to the area that's highlighted in yellow to include a public hearing and SUP shall be required if property is not located within a recorded subdivision with lot sizes that are 1 acre or less, and if the property has not been assessed as ag prior to January 1, 2023?
Well, you can say not currently assessed.
And not
because
currently
that-
assessed.
That's as of the date of the passage of the amendment,
Okay.
right?
And I think further down, we can probably find another area where we can include that just to make sure it's clear. So we already talked about that. So 502 kind of gets into the more specific rules when it comes to cannabis establishments. Number 7 is one that we had in there that basically was kind of, for T4, it was kind of left open. You know, anybody could go in a T4 and, you know, start a cannabis retail. That's how it was, you know, originally worded. But now we're basically saying that if you're in a T4, you need to have an existing county business registration at the time the ordinance was adopted, you know, in order to operate, you know, a cannabis retailer. The way it was before, it basically just left it all open. So anybody could open up a retail shop as long as you had that T4, that T4 zoning. But now we're basically saying, if you want to open up a retailer in T4, it has to be an existing business. You need to have a current and business registration for retail.
When you say at the time the ordinance was adopted, are you talking about the original date?
Yes, thank you.
So that goes back to 2015? Yeah? Right.
17.
17? So just this, should it just say a cannabis retailer may be permitted, providing the county has issued a business registration at the time the ordinance was adopted, which is redundant to what you have up above, and complies with all T4 development standards of this chapter? It seems like you could take out without the application of an SUP. I mean, if they don't need an SUP, why'd you even mention it? Right? County has issued, no, and that, so if an established retail business legally exists in a T4 zone and has an existing county business registration at the time the ordinance was adopted, a cannabis retailer may be permitted if it complies with all T4 development standards of this chapter. All that other stuff is redundant.
Okay. We can make that change. And in here, we can probably, you know, probably on number 10, we can probably, you know, add that language that we just talked about right now at the beginning of the matrix, to state that if they don't have that ag assessment, they can't just go in and change it. So that would be on number 10 as well.
So, Mr. Chair, how do you actually define whether or not a property or a plot or is within a recorded subdivision? One example I'll give you, Carver Road near the sanctuary development. There is an empty lot directly east of that. It's not in the development, but it's right. Is that within the subdivision? I'm gonna quit picking on the Silver, the Silver, Silver Fox or Silver Hawk Street. I can't remember the street. Technically, is that within the subdivision or it is not?
If we click on the property and if it's identified by a lot number, block number, and subdivision, then it would be considered within a recorded subdivision.
So I guess the best question that I guess really the question I want to ask is, would there be a general, vicinity if we're within a quarter acre of a high-density subdivision, or in some cases directly across the street? What defines whether or not it's within that subdivision? Because it's very easy for an applicant or that property to say, we are not within that recorded subdivision. So and I'm not sure if we're able to define how we're able to give a definition of a property being recorded within that subdivision. Is it a distance? I would personally appreciate seeing some distance requirements, because if we are there is some ag property that ag assessed property that's nowhere near any kind of high density subdivision, or could be it could be a little bit lower density where there's not as many where there may not be as many requirements as far as keeping residents around informed. And that's, for me personally, this has been the concern to me was the residents not being aware. It was, I do feel that just as much as an owner of an agricultural assessed property, wants to be able to grow and cultivate and has that right, has that ability, the surrounding residents, especially in a higher density subdivision, have the right to at least be informed before they're driving by their property and all of a sudden they see construction, or they see, and that has probably been the bigger issue with a lot of these concerned residents, is not that it's happening, it's that it's happening without them knowing, without them being informed. It seems to be a 50-50 support versus opposition on whether or not they want that kind of establishment there, but they're more upset because they just were not informed. So, so the question is there a way to define whether or not we're within a recorded subdivision, or is there a way to set a distance a certain distance that would determine whether or not we're within a recorded subdivision?
Well, to answer the first part of that, can you identify a property within a subdivision? Yes. I mean, they're platted, they're recorded, they're identified by a lot number, by a block number. Adjacent property to that, there might be a 30-acre lot outside of the subdivision boundary. So we got to think about if we're going to be adding some type of buffering, from that residential subdivision. Is it going to be to the property line? Is it going to be for the entire property, or are we just talking about maybe structures themselves, greenhouses? What if they're just growing outdoors as well? Is there going to be a distancing between those outdoor plants to the property line of that subdivision?
But they already have buffering requirements already set forth by the state, do they not? Even on a 30
But
acre.
those are related to retail. A lot of the SUPs that you've seen here, it's just because of the retail location is within 300 feet.
So for just growing and cultivation, just open grow, they wouldn't be required to have, fencing and buffering.
Well,
from
yeah, I mean,
access road?
if the growing area, yeah, the state has some security measures, which basically just, the fencing around the growing area. So that is a requirement, but I don't think there's any distance requirements for just growing. I mean, let me double check that. I believe it's just the retail, the one that's limited to schools and daycares. So under 350-502, G2, it says no cannabis establishment, which would be, a growing facility as well. Cannabis consumption area or cannabis courier may be located within 300 feet of a school, K through 12, or daycare center. So those are the only restrictions that we have in our code right now for a production facility. We do have the one for retailers and consumption areas, 2 residential areas, and that's 300 feet, but that's just for retailers and consumption. So the only other restriction is just to schools and daycare centers, and that's per the state, per state code. It doesn't call out a growing facility, having to be a certain distance away from a residential area.
The way this is proposed, the way item 10 is proposed, that it would still, that the SUP would still be required.
Yes, and we're including that additional language that states that they can't just go to the assessor's office and request that ag assessment.
Thank you.
Let's go back to West Carver, west of the tracks, right? There's a school there. There's a laundry there. And then there is a commercial drilling site to the south of there. And then you go further west, and there's a residential area there. And then further west, then you have that establishment there, and there are vacant lots. But to the north of there, I don't know if it's Ag 1, but there's farms, there's pecan orchards there, small ones. So you were saying that you should have a buffer, or?
Not so much a buffer. Well, I mean, there are buffer requirements already in place. I believe if there was a minimum distance requirement, let's say from the end of a subdivision, to the next lot that could be assessed as agriculture. In some cases, they're separated by a thorough street, like, in one case, Valley Drive. Or if they're directly adjacent to, a high-density subdivision, that an SUP should be required specifically to require notification to those residents. This is not an end-all, on the possibility there. I mean, we're requiring a special use permit, and that does not mean that they're automatically denied it. They just would have to, it just would require a hearing and, allow the residents to be able to either write letters in support or opposition or show up here if necessary. All I want to avoid in this case is, again, you end up with a growing, cultivating operation, and the surrounding neighbors were just not notified. Okay, that's.
And Albert, before you begin item number 13, I'm sure it's going to be a very robust discussion amongst all of us. Again, going back, well, go ahead and proceed. We'll talk about it later.
So just before I move on, I'm just going to clarify that on item number 10, we're going to include that additional language stating that they can't just come in and get an ag assessment for a cannabis microbusiness or for any growing facility, that they would be required to get a special use permit. Number 11, that's where we're adding the language for buffering. And then just to kind of, so you guys can envision it, if you have a property line, 12 feet into your property line, it's supposed to be landscaped and buffered. And then that's where you can put your fence, and then everything behind the fence, that's where you're gonna have the growing facility. So that's what we're also recommending as an addition with number 11. Number 12 is just clarifying that you can't have barbed wire or razor fencing if you're next to or adjacent to a residential zoning district or residential use. Number 13, it's something that we've included in there because we've been approached a few times for people who just want to put like a little building, you know, on the lot. If you've driven down Valley next to Calichi's, you know that what used to be like a smoke shack, now they're selling cannabis out of there. So people, you know, in the county have been looking into that. So what we're trying to come up with is just some restrictions, you know, and some guidelines for them. We don't want somebody just to, you know, drop a building there, you know, and start selling cannabis. We're basically asking them to provide parking spaces for every 200 square feet of the floor area. They need to have a stacking lane if they're gonna have a, you know, like a drive-up service as well. You know, we're telling them that it has to be at least 15 feet in width and 200 feet in length. It has to be paved and provided for each drive-up window for the retail establishment. If the retail establishment for the drive-up service is a standalone, let's see, there's more. Did we miss some part on there? So that lane does have to be paved, but we're also adding, if the retail establishment for the drive-up service is a standalone structure, it shall be fixed, permanent, and a non-portable building that meets the requirements of the building and fire code. So it can't just be something that they just drop on the side.
Let me back up one to 11. So that, the case that we had last time in Doñana, the guys that wanted to turn the retail establishment into a cannabis shop, would they have to they wouldn't put a fence up around that, would they?
No, number 11 is just for the growing facilities. For a cannabis micro business or cannabis micro business producer and cannabis producer.
But a cannabis micro business can't, that's a retailer, isn't it?
Yes, but those, well, he's only retail. He's not a micro business. So a micro business is where you're growing, you're manufacturing, you're selling your products. You know, it's supposed to be like an all-in-one shop. This one's just specific for, the one we had in Doñana was just retail.
So that's not included here?
No.
Okay, I understand. On the drive-up window, if I don't have a drive-up window, what are my parking requirements?
Whatever the ITE manual
So-
requires you to do.
So why would we put in this specific language about one parking space per 200 square feet? Wouldn't they just follow the ITE manual for parking?
I believe so, but, and I don't remember if that was a comment from engineering or if that was just what we had in the previous code, do you recall?
I mean, I understand why you would put specific language in about the drive-up lane. But you have to put in something special about parking for that type of business? And if not, why bother putting it in?
So that might already be addressed in other sections of the, you know, the design standards, so we can go ahead and take that off.
Yeah.
But if I recall, that's something that we already had in our code, similar to like restaurants, where we're just trying to tailor that section specifically for cannabis.
Yeah, it looks like you're singling it out, though,
Okay.
and I don't think you want to do that.
Right.
Yeah, because if it's covered elsewhere, then it's not necessary.
Albert, let's go back to drive-up, okay? I wish the sheriff would give us her opinion on that, right? Do you know if liquor, are there any liquor establishments that have drive-up windows now legally?
I can't think of one, and oh yeah, the Circle K's. You can drive up next to them and get your alcohol.
They bring it out to you?
You drive up to the window.
You can drive up to a window and purchase liquor. Where?
Circle K's.
Not liquor, not in New Mexico. They ban those.
I believe that was a state, yeah,
You
that's
can
a
buy,
state
you
law.
can buy beer, just beer.
Okay, Janine, run this by us again. How-
You have to be able
what is
to
it you
lean
can
up
do?
against the window. God almighty.
You can tell we don't drink.
Yeah, I remember that. Okay.
But try and buy alcohol today after work. See how that works.
Yes, I am a child of the 80s. I do remember drive-up alcohol, but now at least being required to get out of your vehicle, and so whoever is on the other side of the counter can make a call on whether or not you're in the condition to purchase more.
And the servers are liable,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing.
Okay, did that answer your question?
My question, if it was up to me, I'd say no drive-up windows, but if they're allowed, if the city allows
Are they,
it, the ability to
there are drive-up establishments in certain municipalities. I do know that they're allowed in the city.
Yeah, my go-to example is just the one that's right next to Dairy Queen. I mean, not Dairy Queen, Calichis. Right on Valley.
So do we require them to get out of the car and go up to?
That is so this is a Collegians on Valley. There's a cannabis establishment with a drive-up window. And is that a permanent building?
I'm not sure.
So
I
I
know
do
it's
know they're-
anchored, it has to be anchored in some shape or manner. But on our end, yeah, we're adding in that requirement. It has to be permanently fixed to the ground.
You know, it just appears that we're adding more fuel to the fire. It's beyond me, but we can say what if and all this, right? I am not for that. For many reasons. But that's just my opinion. Any questions again, commissioners, regarding that issue?
I'd have one question. Does, the cannabis law that the state passed, does it have the same provisions as the liquor law that you have to get out of the car or not?
I am not sure, but I don't, from what I've observed, people just stay in their cars. They don't exit.
Yeah, but what I've seen of the drive-ups is people stay in the car, and I was just wondering if that's something that we can add. If they have to get out of the car.
I'd love for somebody to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I do believe that they do have to show their ID, and it has to match, the name on the order. A lot of those orders are placed online now. And I mean, it's not happening. I mean, they're not doing it. I believe that there's probably even some time, and that they just can't place the order and then go pick it up. But yes, they're able to drive up, somebody comes out, checks their ID, make sure it's them, age verification, everything, and then they are able to go back and give them what they're looking for. In some cases, commissioners are just even, I believe that that's actually beneficial, even from, let's say medical patients. Maybe a disabled patient is not able to get out of his car, but I do understand your concern on recreational use.
I have a medical card for marijuana, so yes, you have to show it all the time, they run it through all the things. I'm just wondering about, the reason we do the drive up with the liquor is to make sure the guy isn't smashed.
They're operating a vehicle,
Gets back
yes.
on the road. It would seem logical that the same thing would apply with cannabis.
Absolutely.
And I'm sort of surprised that the state cannabis law does not include the same sort of restriction.
But that's not the problem is, that's not a land use issue.
No, it's not a land.
whether somebody gets out of their car or not, that's someplace else in the code.
Yeah.
I would think the county sheriff would have to take that up,
Right. Yeah.
right?
It's just that, I just thought we'd just discuss that and just leave it at that.
So,
And-
so, Mr. Chair, Albert, do we have anything in the code about drive-up windows for fast food restaurants?
There is a section for that. And like I said it before, this section right here kind of mirrored that already. So we're just following on whatever we already had on there, on the code. Yeah, it's.
And does the city, Janine, have the same ordinance as this one, drive up?
Actually, Mr. Chair, we did model our regulations after the cities, but I'm not sure if the city specifically has addressed drive-up windows for cannabis. But they are permitted because, you know, there's that one along Valley Drive. And the reason why we added this is, I believe we got a request done in
Yeah, we're
Chaparral.
just trying to anticipate, you know, future requests. We know this one has come in a few times already. And since we don't have any guidelines for just, you know, somebody who wants to put just a drive-up window, you know, we thought that might as well just include them under the amendments just to cover ourselves a little bit. Just to have something in writing about what the requirements are.
Wouldn't the Cannabis Control Division have their own guidelines on drive-up windows?
I'm sure they do. And they would have to follow, you know, those specific rules for cannabis retailer.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I mean, there are those concerns. I agree, Mr. Commissioner Zerniak, that a lot of those really do not have to do with land use. But I guess if anybody wanted to address those concerns, I'd love to one day speak with somebody in either cannabis control. Because I do believe that there, just as somebody with a server's permit has to identify somebody who may have consumed too much alcohol before purchasing more, I would assume, and I'd love confirmation, that somebody with a permit with a retail permit to sell cannabis is, you know, still required to identify those signs and make that determination whether or not they can sell. Again, it's not a land use issue, but I just wanted to address that concern once again, because drive-through, definitely, there's got to be some state guidelines as far as drive-through goes.
But I think you made a good point. If somebody's driving up to a window for recreational purposes as opposed to medical,
Yes.
I could see them say, you know, you have to get out of your car. But that sounds like the county sheriff. That doesn't sound like a planning commission issue.
Sounds like a state police issue.
I mean, we can't enforce, there's no way we can enforce that, so.
Yeah, basically, the only thing we can enforce when it comes to cannabis is just zoning, building requirements, building code, fire code, you know, that kind of stuff.
And for the safety and general welfare of the public, I mean, we have to take that into consideration, am I right? Is a land use issue. The other one also, I mean, I feel that on the side of law enforcement that, you know, you have to protect the people that they're doing their job. You want to send them home safely as they came in, and a lot of respect for that. So I look at not just a land use issue, but as a whole envelope regarding the use of this ordinance. And that's my statement. Protect law enforcement officers that are out there trying to do their job, and the people around them. So, and that's my statement. Any other discussion? Okay, proceed.
Well, I think that's all the info I had on cannabis. We'll go ahead and include those amendments in our, on our changes. The next item, it's going to be community solar facilities, and I'll have Janine finish that section off.
And by the way, Janine, that facility we have up front regarding solar, is that for just the county or anybody?
Yes, I do believe it's for the county. I don't really have any information on it, to tell you the truth, but it is an electric vehicle that's powered by solar. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so now moving on to the solar, community solar facilities. Since the state adopted the Community Solar Act, we've got an influx of applications. So we're proposing some regulations and guidelines. And what we're proposing is modeled after the city of Santa Fe's. We hadn't made any changes since the last public hearing. So we are asking that the applicant submit a detailed site plan that shows all the proposed and existing infrastructure improvements that meets the specifications of the detailed site plan process that's outlined in section 35208.
So let's look at just the opening statement,
Okay,
okay? And this is at the end. It says, "The county shall accommodate the needs of the community solar facility providers and will try to minimize adverse effects." So my question is, why would we, I would change it to this. I
Okay.
would say the county shall consider the needs, not accommodate. Accommodate, it means that we accept what they want to do, and I don't think that's correct. And so shall consider the needs of the community solar facility providers and will minimize adverse effects.
okay. Okay, perfect.
Okay?
So we'll delete accommodate and replace it with consider, and delete will try to, so it will be will minimize adverse effects. Okay, thank you for that. So in addition to the site plan, they'll also have to, they will not have to buffer and screen the ground-mounted facilities. And if they are proposing fencing around the facility for security purpose, we're recommending that agricultural fencing 6 to 8 feet in height with 6-inch knots to protect the wildlife is recommended.
Don't they have to have fencing?
I don't believe it's a requirement. We've been requiring it.
Oh, so this is under an SUP, right?
Well, yeah, it's for only community solar.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just for clarity, so the way the code's currently written, community solar does not require fencing? Those have all just been
Our recommendation.
a recommendation. And most, if not all, every SCP we've seen for community solar has had fencing proposed.
Yeah.
And landscaping, I believe, right? Yeah.
I just couldn't see how anybody who's applying for community solar wouldn't want to have some kind of fencing around it for their protection. Thank you.
Okay, so number 3, addressing the external roads. The external roads and driveways may be reduced to no less than 20 feet if there is adequate drainage control. And then the surface has to be hard-packed dirt with a compaction of 95% of the maximum density. And then if the access road adjoins a paved road, we're requiring that asphalt or a concrete apron be required to protect the pavement. Alrighty.
The pavement of the roadway,
Yes.
right?
Shall I add that to pavement of the roadway?
Yeah, I think so, because it's not clear what pavement you're talking about.
And then item 4. So they will also have to submit an approved SWIP and a grading and drainage plan, excuse me, prior to the issuance of a construction or building permit. And then the area that's highlighted in blue is the amendment that's recommended from the Development Review Committee. And it states that if the property is located within a FEMA special hazard flood area, they need to consult with the Flood Commission to ensure that that it will be properly maintained and operated regarding the storm drainage and flood control facilities. And that includes all the natural drainage systems.
Do we have to include any grubbing of the land there, or is that dictated by construction industries?
Yes, if they are gonna, the grade, they will need a grading and drainage permit. Grubbing is defined as grading, actually, in the code. Any questions on that one? And then they will also need to submit approval from the state for the facility before we issue the construction or building permit. And then on number 6, we're requiring that the disturbed areas shall be reseeded with drought-tolerant native plant species. Okay, and that the weeds and plant materials shall be properly maintained to reduce fire risks. And then finally, they'll have to submit a remediation and decommissioning plan. And then we went ahead and identified what elements need to be included in that plan.
That's well written.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, awesome. Charlene did a lot of research on this, so I have to thank her for that. Okay, and then finally, we're adding a new section for renewable energy facilities. And we're stating that they shall follow the same guidelines and requirements as community solar facilities unless the renewable energy source does not require any site infrastructure improvements or state permitting requirements. Okay, any questions on that?
So Janine, just this wording on the last part under the glossary. It
Okay.
said subscribers to the facility receive a bill credit? Is that, you mean a credit on their bill? Maybe I'm just being nitpicky about that. A bill credit, or should it just say receive a credit for the electricity generated in proportion to the subscriber's share of the facility's kilowatt-hour output? You're talking about a credit on their electrical bill, right?
Yes, that's what I believe it's referring to.
I guess that's okay, a bill credit. Just seems awkward.
And it's actually taken directly from the Solar Act, that definition. And then for special use permits, we're just adding the word intensity to the definition.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Back on H3,
Okay,
the statement reads, the roads and driveways may not be, may be reduced to no less than 20 feet. Why doesn't it just say will be at least 20 feet?
okay. Shall be? Okay. So shall be 20 feet if adequate drainage control is provided, et cetera. Okay, so we'll delete reduce to no less than. Alrighty. Okay, so we have several changes. Shall I recap them, or shall we bring them back next meeting? Or shall we move forward to the recommendation with the Board of County Commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Do you have, as one of your changes, if you go to page 12, do you have changes in the classification for the T2, 3, 4, and 5, and the DL, or D2, D2L, D3, DM, and MU? Or are you saying that, do you have that as a change, or is it going to stay as it's presented here?
Okay, so the change that we're currently making from your input was to add the statement to this phrase at the end, with lot sizes that are 1 acre or less, that is not currently assessed as agriculture. Correct? And then we specifically didn't address removing any A's from the matrix. Is that what your question?
Yeah, I'm just real uncomfortable putting that, making that allowable in all of those, in all those places.
No, it still requires an SUP, right?
Yes, if they don't have the ag assessment.
Yeah, the A doesn't mean allowed, it just means that it's agriculturally assessed and it requires an SUP.
Correct. And then a public hearing if it's in a recorded subdivision of 1 acre lot sizes or smaller.
All right.
So, I don't know how you do this in the matrix, but what if it's not ag assessed?
Then a public hearing is automatically required.
Then they would have to submit for the SUP.
Why wouldn't we just say it's not allowed?
We could go that route. And like I said, from what I recall, I think that was our original recommendation.
I still think that.
I concur, I believe.
Right? I think that was our original recommendation. I think at the most, we were recommending them to be allowed to submit for an SUP if they were D1 or D1L, because, you know, those are your bigger tracks. And we weren't allowing them in D2 and D3 and MU and all those other categories, but, you know.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then, of course, you know, through the BLCC hearings and public input, they kind of reversed that and basically went along the route that if you can have ag on any lot, you know, with any type of zoning, then you should be able to grow cannabis. That's kind of like what the outcome was, and that's kind of like what you're seeing all those A across the board there, because they're basically, the BLCC basically stated if your property is assessed as ag, you know, no matter what the zoning is, then you should be allowed to grow. And I think by us adding, you know, that extra language now in there, we're basically closing that door to anybody who's not assessed as ag.
So what ended up happening was that it wasn't really concerned to the properties that were already assessed as agriculture. It was properties that were not, and giving the applicant the ability to just walk across the hall and have their property assessed with, and in some cases, there really weren't many questions asked. And so this is, again, an unintended consequence. And I do, there were many concerns about where some SUPs would be required. I do remember specifically Commissioner Ellens at the time came here to our hearing, and one of his concerns was he did not want us to lose any opportunity to retain a lot of those cannabis micro producers to some of the municipalities that may not have been as restrictive as we would have been. I know that was a very big concern for him as well. But yes, that was our initial recommendation was for SUPs to be required in, you know, in quite a few of these zones. And that was that was amended by the Board of Commissioners.
I mean, that's my personal opinion is that we shouldn't allow it in those, and
In high
Dan,
density.
Dan added some. I think did you start with T2, D2?
Yeah, so I had T3, T4, T5 included in that. My concern is, when you're talking about ag assessment, it seems to me like we're trying to prevent this by going in a roundabout way of doing it, rather than directly. And my other concern is, if you're in a subdivision, and it just so happens there's a couple of lots in there that did have ag assessment before January 1st, and other ones didn't, that means that those people in that subdivision could grow marijuana where maybe the guy across the street can't.
Right.
Yeah.
There's Mesilla Vineyard Estates. They had come up with a concept, and I really like, they called it the Agri-Hood.
Right.
If you will, and actually was a really good concept. It didn't last as long as, I think, as long as I would have loved to see it, but that land there where they're growing, they have these small farm operations. Would the owner of that property be able to start growing cannabis there?
That's a good question. If it's ag assessed,
It's right in the middle. I mean, it's within walking distance of all those, I mean, I'm sure some would be very, very, well, again, that would only be growing and cultivation. It wouldn't be, retail, but at the same time, that would be a concern. It really would.
but a micro business producer can do all three. Produce, package, and sell, right?
They can't sell.
They can't
A
sell.
micro business producer. So if you recall, we ended up creating that cannabis micro business producer because, we figured that there was just going to be people that just wanted to grow. They weren't interested in manufacturing. They weren't interested in retailing. But the micro business producer would only allow them to grow and package, but package to a level where you're not getting it down all the way to where it's ready to sell. You can package, put it in bags, big bags, and then
Yeah.
ship them off to wherever, that they're able to package them and label them and do all that stuff. If you're just a cannabis producer, that's all you're allowed to do. You can only grow and package, but not packaging to a retail level.
I don't think there's anything wrong with making that recommendation again. If they don't have ag assessment, that it's not allowed in those zones that Dan listed.
Can you repeat those zones again?
T3, T4, T5, D2, D2L, D3, DM, and MU.
I mean, I don't know how I know how Dan feels, I know how I feel. I don't know, I think Steve's okay with it. I don't know about the other three. We probably should check before we make a recommendation like that.
Okay, so the proposal is to eliminate the As, and they would not be permitted for the micro business producer and producer. So delete the As in both of those categories in T3, T4, T5.
No, Janine, I think if they have an ag assessment, I don't think we can change that. I'm saying if they don't have an ag assessment, right? I mean, I don't know how I'm not sure that if they currently have ag assessment on their property, we're already allowing them to do that.
That's
Correct.
true.
In all those zones. What I'm saying is, if they currently don't have an ag assessment, then it would not be allowed.
Okay. So I think then we corrected it
Yeah.
with this amendment. Correct, Albert?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was the intent of the amendment. We're basically stating that if you don't have that ag assessment right now,
Okay.
that you're not allowed to do it.
And we're adding, at the end of that statement highlighted in yellow, that is not currently assessed as agriculture.
Mr. Chair, I still believe that, I understand why you're making that recommendation. I'm still concerned that there could be properties already assessed as agriculture that would fit into these, several of these. And there would also be, the majority of those in there would not have an ag assessment. And so it's kind of like, it's almost like a spot zoning, in that you're allowing something to happen, but nobody around them could do it.
Do it.
It's, to me, it seems like we're setting up a conflict for ourselves down the road that we're gonna run into,
The
that I'm
only-
not sure it's gonna be easy to solve.
The only other thing I'm going to point out is that one of the things that the BOCC looked at was, if we go down the list of uses, they looked at farming and ranching as well. So if across farming and ranching, if you have that ag assessment, then you should be able to do it. And that's kind of like how, from what I recall, that's kind of like what they looked like, was that, if you can grow under any type of zoning, if you can grow onions or chili, then you should be able to grow cannabis. But that was their take on it.
Question, what about looking at the wine tasting room and winery? Isn't that more like what we're talking about with the cannabis businesses than just straight ag? I mean, I noticed there you've got your wine tasting and winery going across just about all of the requiring the special use permits and stuff. But again, you've left out the D1, 1L, D2, the tight, the small property lot sizes and stuff. Wouldn't it be worth looking at the cannabis businesses to be more like the wine tasting and stuff than just plain agriculture?
I think they're not up on here, but when we look at the retail, I think they kind of mirror that, the wine tasting room and the winery itself. But not for somebody that's just a grower, because they're not really selling anything on site. It's just the farming, the production of the crop that's taking place. But once again, I mean, if that's an item that the commission wants to address, whether or not taking off the A's off of, some of those zoning designations, then that's more within your, that can be done through a recommendation from the P&Z. We just have to take that forward to the Board of County Commissioners and see how they feel about that.
Well, even if you use the A's and just eliminated those D1 zones, just the way the wine tasting is, just leave those all A's instead of the S's and P's, and leave those other zones just blank like that. Wonder if that would work. Would that solve this problem?
I think that's kind of what Commissioner Lear was referencing. I'm not sure about the only one I'm kind of worried about is the T3, because it's kind of like it's already outside on the outskirts already, and a lot of the SUPs that we've seen are for T3 properties. You might want to consider maybe just leaving an S on there for the producers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that makes sense.
And then eliminating the A's on T4, T5, and D2 through MU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm getting a flashback.
It's too dense. It's too dense. That's the problem. I remember the case up on, off at Del Rey. You remember that? The guy that was in a neighbor, he was a medical producer, small producer,
Right.
and he wanted to go commercial,
Right.
right? And I think we let him do it.
We just celebrated his 1-year anniversary in
Part of that,
in February.
part of those conditions were there was going to be a 1-year evaluation,
Was
because
it?
we had only allowed him half of the state's allowable.
That's true.
Not even, okay, so the conditions were because the state would allow him to go up to 200 plants, but the P and Z only allowed him to do 100. And he was on a 1-year period of where he could only grow 50. After the 1 year, you know, Sean and Captain Herrera were gonna go out there, look at the facility. And if we didn't have like any complaints about it, they were allowed to grow up to 100 plants, and I think that already happened.
So they were okay?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, just to add, I can tell even out of the majority of our applicants, they seem to have done their homework a lot. They were clearly kind of ahead of, you know, a lot of what the state required and what we were asking of them. And I think part of it had to do because they'd been doing medical for so long. It's interesting celebrating a 1-year anniversary. You know.
1-year anniversary.
But I think Dan has a good point, that if the commissioners object to that, especially in a subdivision, I think you can raise the spot zoning issue. That's a pretty clear case of a spot zone inside of a subdivision.
Yeah, we'll take a note of those recommendations and take them before the board.
Let's see what the consensus is.
Okay.
Make sure that I'm clear with the amendment.
So if I can recap real quick, the recommendation from Commissioner Lear was to have an A in T2 for both the producer and cannabis, for both microbusiness producer and cannabis producer. We're gonna have an S for a special use permit under T3 for both of those. And we're gonna eliminate the A's from T4, T5, and from D2 all the way through MEU.
So they will be blank.
They would be blank. So, and then just to clarify, with that change and with the additional language that's being proposed, we're basically saying that anybody in a T2 zone and a D1 or D1L zone who didn't have an ag assessment before, they can't also be allowed to grow in the future. So just to clarify.
Yeah.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Well, we still have well, yes, I guess it does.
All right.
Unless there's
Thank you,
more.
Albert.
Quit while you're ahead.
All right. Any questions of staff, commissioners?
So it just require a vote? Just require a motion?
I think, yes.
So the question, I think Janine asked the question, do we want to vote on it, or do we want to, should they bring it back again?
Let's do this. Let's get it back cleaned up.
Okay,
And then we know what we need to amend again. Is that okay?
I agree. And that gives us an opportunity to, as this commission, to say that we put out another notice that this is.
All right.
This is happening.
Very good. It gives the general public some more input.
Absolutely.
Maybe they have something to say that we haven't heard.
Because we definitely heard a lot from them today. So appreciate all of you here. Thank you.
So I think staff has done an excellent job with this, and we really appreciate it.
Very unified.
So we will actually postpone this public hearing and reconvene on April 13th with
Okay.
these proposals. Okay. So then we don't necessarily need to re-advertise, we're just,
Do we need to vote on that?
I think we probably should, just to be clear.
Good.
And I'm curious, though, do we have a consensus for eliminating the As in those land use categories? Commissioner Castañeda? Okay. Sargis? Cerniak?
You look more like the one.
I agree.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. So it is unanimous, perfect. Okay, so what we'll do is we will bring back these changes, and I will actually put them in blue font, just so they stand out, so you can see what changes we made from this public hearing. Awesome.
So I'll move that we postpone the public hearing until April 13th.
Postpone or continue? Postpone and continue, okay. Okay. And before you leave, Priscilla, I would like to introduce Priscilla Ramirez. She was just promoted from a development tech from the front counter to a planning assistant who was doing zoning enforcement. So she actually took over Frankie Estrada's position. So we have two zoning enforcement people, her and Kevin Apalaca. So she's still in the training mode, but I believe she's ready to go and start enforcing the UDC.
Congratulations.
Welcome on board.
Welcome to the monkey house.
Well, the requirement is that you have to buy coffee and donuts at the end of the
Yes,
session.
that's right. No, I think it's actually burritos because she's an excellent cook. Thank
We
you,
have a lot of fun
Priscilla.
here.
And just remember, we don't run the meeting like Robert's Rules of Order, okay? It's, I like to have free flow of conversation.
Yes.
And I guess we've been doing it for a long time with a lot of respect for the general public, staff, and amongst ourselves. So I do appreciate your demeanor. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
And did we get a
You
second
got a
on that
motion,
motion?
you don't have a second.
Second.
okay, we have a motion on the floor, and it's been second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right, item number 6.
Okay, so in your agenda packet, we do have a map that delineates the permits that were issued for the month of February. So we issued 12 brand-new single-family residential permits that are highlighted in yellow on the map. And then we issued 3 new commercial buildings, and those are identified in blue. Up on the top in the Hatch Valley, there were 2 building permits issued for a ag warehouse. And then just right outside the ETZ is the other commercial structure.
Janine, on that one up there on Rhodey, what is that?
Storage and warehouse for Organic Pecan Company. So it's for warehouse and storage of pecans.
And the one on West Picacho, there's a big building there, West Picacho.
Yep, it's a metal building. Which one is
Storage?
that, Albert? 4045 Picacho. Richard Bolano?
I'm not sure. And we did a zone change right off of Berg for for a mechanic shop for ATVs not too long ago.
Oh,
It
is
might-
that
it-
one?
It might be that one, unless Eileen knows which one that one is. Oh,
4045. Yes, West Picacho. I believe it is that moto, what do we have, motocross or
the throat punch.
motorcycles or motocross or?
You had it all figured out, right? Okay. So what was the
So
total?
Eileen's gonna look it up to see what it's specifically for.
What was the dollar amount? Did you have it?
169,000.
How much was it?
The valuation of the building they're constructing, 169,600
What was your total for the month?
for valuation or
Yeah.
permit? 8,355,000,
And what did you get building permit fees?
59,628.
I think it's another mechanic shop past the river. to your left. If we're driving west, it's going to be on your left.
Yeah, it was that zone change that we did a while back.
No, it wasn't the Burke one. It's, that one's already
it's not?
zoned. It was just a building permit, so. But it's just basically a mechanic shop. That's what it is.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Do you have any information on the, I'm assuming they're agricultural warehouse kind of buildings on North Valley, on the west side, just south of Engler? There are two of them that sit back off the road. They're just, it looks like they're just about finished with construction. And it looks like a warehouse, doesn't it?
On that farmland that
Yeah,
was
it's on
there?
farmland.
Do we know anything about that?
Is it west of
Engler?
85?
Oh, yeah, I
Highway
know.
85 north?
That's that big brown
No.
one over there, right?
Say that again, Mr.?
That big brown building.
Yeah, the big brown one, and there's another one that sits
Two up
farther
and there's
back.
one behind it, yeah. There's like two of them sitting there on that lot.
Eileen will look it up for us, yeah.
Okay. Staff input.
Nothing further, Mr. Chair. Albert, do you have anything?
I'll just, I just wanted to point out that the zone change that we heard last meeting with the trucking company, that one's probably going to be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. So I'll keep you posted on the outcome.
I'm sorry, what was the nature of that case?
The 5 trucks that were being parked on
Oh,
the
yes.
on the
Thank
property
you.
in Doñana.
And what happened?
They're
That's
gonna
being
appeal.
appealed, okay.
They're going to appeal.
They're going to appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. They had court right on Friday, right after a hearing, and the judge just, he said, okay, well, go through the process and we'll see what happens.
Yes, that's the judge. Yeah,
Judge punted.
yes. All right. Albert, is it all right to just remind everybody in here that there was a notice for applicants for members of the Planning and Zoning Commission coming up pretty soon?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Montan, yes, we are recruiting for 3 planning and zoning commissioners. The deadline to submit any application is April 7th. And it will consist
Who
of,
is up for reappointment?
Commissioner Zarges, Commissioner Zerniak, and Commissioner Edetta.
Okay. All right. Item number 8, commission input. Question I have for, go ahead.
Christina, could I ask you a question? A couple months ago, we were talking about Santa Teresa. Has there been any movement? You indicated that there was the possibility of that coming back to under the county's
Yes.
purview. Has anything happened with that?
We have not made a lot of progress pending Sunland Park hiring a new city manager, which I believe now someone is in place. And so the county manager is, again, working with Sunland Park to move that forward. But the plan is still to bring the planning authority back to the county. And it's a priority for the county manager, so I believe that now that they have someone in Sunland Park that we can work with, we'll be moving forward as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
So the JPA is, will be over. Have the BOCC already negotiated that? And when will we take over that area down there?
Well, as I mentioned, the county manager is renegotiating the joint powers agreement. So it will ultimately have to go to the BOCC, but it first has to be agreed upon by Sunland Park and then approved by the CRUA board. And we do have, we do have concurrence from the CRUA board that they want to move forward with this. So it's just a matter of making sure that Sunland Park agrees to the terms and then we can move forward with the JPA.
And the next question I have is, if there's any petitioners coming before us, do we have to go there, or do they come down here?
When there are applications in that area, they go to the CRUA board. The CRUA also has a P&Z. And so we still process applications like we do for anyone else in the county, but we present them to the boards in CRUA.
And what about water rights? Are they transferred also to the county or not?
No, the water authority will, the water utility will still be in place. So the only thing is that they will not have planning authority anymore. But the utility will not change.
Okay, all right. All right, Chair entertains a motion for adjournment, item number 9.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor, second. All those in favor of saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.